who knows what happens if it goes into the cloud? We'll never see it again, never hear it again. So we're great. We're great. John, just before we get right into it, can I say thanks very much for agreeing to do this? The folks in the Academy are at the start of their career in social care. And I remember when I started my career in social care, I heard you speak, and it was a real light bulb moment for me. And your thinking and your work's been really influential for me. So it seemed only fair if we could organise it for you to come and be part of this group's journey. So I want to welcome you, good old Thistle welcome. And again, to say thank you very much for doing this. We're looking forward to all that you have to say. Thank you. Over to you.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, let's hope that 50 minutes or so from now, you're still in the mood to thank me.
Okay.
I thought that I might come at this by thinking with you about how we chose the words person-centered. And in time, that was in the early 1980s. And coincidentally, that's about the time that I made my very first trip to Scotland, and my very first occasion to be on the grounds of Lennox Castle in Glasgow, which at that time was slowly reducing its population from about 1,700 people who lived there in the early 70s. And some friends of mine and I were there to talk to staff people about the benefits of community living, and to say that we found a unresponsive and downright hostile audience would be kind of an understatement. It was actually scary to be there at that point and to be representing the idea that this wasn't the best possible arrangement for people. So the times were such that my friends and I had been approaching institutionalization as a social justice issue. I had come into the work for people with intellectual disabilities or learning difficulties as an alternative service, as a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War. I had no plan in my life that I would be involved with people with disabilities. I found myself working in an institution that was even bigger than Lennox Castle as what was then called a ward aide, which was the bottom of the food chain as far as the staff in the place was concerned. And I became convinced very quickly that this was an inhumane way to treat people, especially the conditions that we found there. And so by the time my friends and I decided to choose person-centered as the way to describe where we thought a better future lay, we'd had a bit more than 10 years. I started this work in 1968. And if you want to avoid doing the math, I'm 75 at the moment. And we chose the term person-centered on purpose in this context because we'd learned a lot in 10 or 12 years of working to make the institution unnecessary. One of the things that we learned was that it was possible to make very substantial improvements in the quality of people's lives simply by avoiding massive overcrowding, providing a sufficient number of staff people to actually provide the physical care and attention that people needed, making people's diets better and moving them to smaller accommodations, that giving people opportunities to learn things, that all those things made massive improvements in people's lives. But we had also learned that as the institution faded away, it didn't disappear. And we had opportunities to set up group living arrangements like this one, which is just a random picture of a place in England that a number of us visited to kind of check in on how community services were going. At this point, by the way, I was visiting the UK 2 or 3 times a year from where I live and do most of my work in the US and Canada. So we discovered that you could improve people's living conditions massively, and that was a truly important thing to be doing. But we had learned that the ghosts of the institution still haunt us. It took until 2002, I think, to get Lennox Castle closed, and there were fights and conflicts about it right up till the very end. But we had learned that just being crusaders wasn't quite enough to actually right the wrong that society was imposing on people with disabilities through the work that we were doing. And so we noticed that as we changed the way that we identified people, and people's denomination went from being patients to being residents to being clients. And by about the beginning of the 1980s, some people had begun to talk about people as consumers, as though they were, I don't know what, kind of buying services in a market. As these changes happened, the name for the condition kept changing. We went from mentally defective at the time that Lennox Castle was built to mentally deficient, to mentally subnormal, to mentally retarded. More recently, we've moved on to intellectually disabled in most of the world, and learning disability in much of the UK. And I'm pretty sure we'll keep looking for better names as we go along. But the pattern of diagnosing people and sorting them, and for most of the time that Lennox Castle was around all over the world, we sorted people in schemes like this one. There were the majority of people who were with a disability who were educable. There were a smaller proportion who were called trainable, and then there were a small number of the people who carried whatever the label was at the time, whom we identified as custodial people, that we had very little hope for people who tended to die very young. At one point, the death rate for people classified as custodial in the US, the lifespan of people declared custodial was around 17 years old. So people tended to die very early if they got that label. And if they survived it, they were unbelievably tough human beings. No matter what the name, the pattern stayed the same unless we worked really intentionally and really purposefully to overcome the haunts, the ghosts of the institution. And that pattern was a pattern of, you are now on professional turf, and people who are qualified as experts in your diagnosis, in your deficiency, are in charge of you. A physician, a psychologist, some other professional person might meet you and spend only a few minutes with you, 20, 30 minutes sometimes, and make a decision about whether you were going to stay in the institution or whether you were going to have a chance to leave. A professional team might take as much as an hour to read reports about you and decide whether you got to live in the community or not. And in any setting, staff people were expected to exercise power over you. You were seen as somebody who needed supervision, who needed to be controlled, who needed to be taught, who needed to be changed or contained. And the story about you, regardless of the label in the left-hand column, is that you're flawed. There are defects inside the boundaries of your body that produce deficiencies. And these deficiencies separate you out. You're one of them. You're not one of us. And the classification that you get defines your identity, the place that you live, and your future. You could go from a ward for people who were classified as violent to a group home that grouped you with some number, 6, 8, 10, 12 other people whose behavior was defined as challenging. And your future was, if you can't learn to control yourself, you'll be there forever. So that pattern of power over you because of your deficiencies, dealing with you as one of them, and being in charge of your future, persisted and persists till today, although there are huge amounts of progress that have been made in working in a more person-centered way. And the academy that you're part of is part of a systematic effort all over the world to break that pattern. But for many, many, many people, it's not broken yet. Still in the United States, we have more than 200,000 people who still live with 15 or more other people with disabilities who still live inside this pattern. And we chose person-centered as words to help break up that pattern, just to give names to the breaking of that pattern. But as I say, it still persists. This is a picture from my email about a week ago. There's a group in the south of England called Stay Up Late. If you don't know about it, might be interesting for you to Google it. Stay Up Late was founded by a punk rock band who noticed that when they were playing, they were popular with a number of people with learning disabilities. But all of a sudden at 9 o'clock at night, which was a little early in the punk rock scene, all the people with disabilities and their staff would get up and leave. And they inquired into this and discovered that people were expected back at the group home to go to bed. And so they created Stay Up Late, which does a great job of matching people who like to be out in the night scene and ordinary people who also like to do that, who get qualified as they need to be people's, to go hang out with people so they can stay up late. And one of the Stay Up Late initiatives is here on the banner, hashtag no bedtimes. I'm going to ask in just a minute to just with a couple people near you, take just 5 minutes and think together about no bedtimes. So just think for a minute what you were doing at 8 o'clock last Friday night. Just cast your mind back 3 days and think about around 8 o'clock, what were you doing? The big bedtime audit was an effort by 2 social work teams in the northwest of England. And they visited twice, 6 months apart. They visited about 250 people in all different kinds of staffed accommodations, supported tenancies, supported group living, residential care. And they just described what they found people doing on Thursday and Friday evening. And this is, I think, 2019, but it doesn't really matter. Just think about this phenomenon. So at 8 o'clock on a Thursday and Friday evening, 70% of the people were in bed or ready for bed. 20% of them were asleep at 8 o'clock on Friday evening. 23% were awake and not ready for bed. 7% had gone out. When they asked the staff people to account for early bedtimes, a bit more than half of them said that this reflected the person's choice, that people chose to go to bed early. That's not the interpretation that the No Bedtimes group put on the big bedtime audit. But I'd like you to just take 5 minutes with 2 other people and just speculate, just make up some other possible explanations. Why else might everybody be in bed? Why might 70% of the people be in bed? Why else might 20% of the people be asleep? It's perfectly reasonable to say some people like to go to bed really early, but Friday night. So just have a go at that for 4 or 5 minutes. I'll let you know when the time's up.
Okay, thanks.
Interrupt. Let's just take a minute or two and hear some of the things that could explain this in addition to it's the person's choice. Just what did you come up with? We have no way of knowing in the real situations, but what could we imagine is the reason, or are other reasons for this bedtime pattern?
We said that perhaps the shift is changing and that it's easy for the staff to get everybody in bed before the shift's done, so that the night shift is the easier shift. It's something like that.
Yep.
We said maybe some people just use.
Sorry, it's a bit hard to hear you.
How we can do this? Yeah, come up to the microphone. Yeah, come up.
So we said some people just maybe used to the daily routine what they were given.
We're just sticking with the routine that they had. Yeah, just used to that. Yeah.
Medication.
Medication is another. Yeah. What else?
I guess reluctance to go outside of the box, perhaps laziness or some sort of reluctance to kind of do more, perhaps as a routine, and there looks to be an easier shift on the other side if that person were to go to bed early. Perhaps there might be a change of staff, as mentioned before, so a reluctance to do more than asked.
Right.
Understaffing.
Yeah, just say again.
Understaffing.
No, understaffing. Yeah, so
Yes.
easier for people to be in
Yes.
bed. Yeah.
Lack of opportunities open to people.
So people just don't have opportunities to do other things. Yeah. Andrew said something that chimed with me, John. He said that when you get a bit older, actually you're sometimes quite happy to go to your bed at 8 o'clock. It feels like a treat. Yeah, so possible.
Okay, well, see if this makes sense. I noticed that our speculations, our possibilities, fall in a couple of directions. Some of the explanations, and I'm sure they're perfectly valid, are it's the person's preference. People may like to get up really, really early, and so they want to go to bed earlier or whatever. So there's an explanation that sets the reason inside the person, in the person. There are possible explanations that see this as the person's response to the way the service is set up, right? This is when this is a function of the pattern of medicating people. This is a function of the way the staff, when the staff change happens, or the way the staff change happens, or it works out better for the staffing rota this way. And then there's a kind of explanation that reaches even further out to say, what opportunities do these folks have for there to be something better to do than get ready for bed and watch your TV or be asleep? What's the bigger picture of your life? And the reason that we chose person-centered as the words falls toward those third kind of explanations, those explanations that say, what's the pattern of opportunity in a person's life? And how engaged is the person in organizing those opportunities? And you can be engaged, we learned, in organizing those opportunities, even when your communication is exceptionally difficult for us to understand. So we chose the term person because of things that are attributes of a person, are what a person is, at least to us. We said, well, the first thing about a person is that a person is a social being. We could also call somebody, we could have called it individual planning or individual centered planning, but for us, that put the accent in the wrong place. That referred as though it were to an isolated person, rather than the fact that from our earliest life, we are social beings, right? We count on each other. Our flourishing is dependent in many ways on to whom we belong and to whom we connect and to whom we relate. So we chose person because a person is a social being, because a person without qualification has dignity, because a person has dignity regardless of their capacity to act in any particular way, regardless of how they score on some checklist of adaptive behavior, regardless of how much difficulty they may have with self-regulation, regardless of the extent of their limitation, their physical or communication limitation. A person has dignity without qualification. And a person is guided by purpose and desire. We can trust a person to struggle to live authentically and to cultivate desires and pursue purposes that have meaning. A person has a purpose. It may not be clear, it may not be sensible, but a person seeks a purpose. And a person is equal to others, regardless of differences. A person has an equal claim on citizenship, and a person develops through engagement, not by doing mindless tasks in the day center or by practicing making their bed over and over and over again, but by being engaged in real life and having real responsibility and taking real risks. Now, all of these things may just sound like happy thoughts, and they are, in my mind, happy thoughts. That is not a bad thing, but there are also opportunities to learn. We still have now huge amounts to learn about supporting people in their citizenship, about supporting people in belonging to a diverse range of associations and relationships that are guided by purpose and desire. We still have masses to learn in terms of supporting people in intimate relationships, to find life partners, to find sexual partners, huge amounts to learn about what works to support people to achieve greater self-regulation. So, and all these things are contested. All these things are contested. People don't agree about this yet. And that's good. There's a social conflict that we haven't resolved yet about the place of people who require publicly funded support because of the impact of their impairments. So the difference is we've still got these things that shrink a person and box them in to a notion that they're not whole beings, but that they're broken and can't be fixed, right? They're broken and can't be fixed. So they're deficient by nature. They belong with their own kind, which is different from us, right? They're happier with other people who have the same labels. Certainly, people find great support and consolation when they organize with other people with disabilities, as the No Bedtimes group has done. But the idea that that exhausts all of people's interests and possibilities for belonging is, frankly, in my mind, ridiculous. In the background is a perception, a social perception of people with differences of body, mind, and brain as a menace of some sort. Lennox Castle grew huge in the era when the idea of eugenics was popular and people with mild intellectual impairments were blamed for social degeneracy of all kinds. So there's that ghost behind the ghost of a menace. There's another story that's popular, that people with learning disabilities are eternal children, and that therefore they're incompetent to make decisions. They don't know what's good for them, and they can't learn what's good for them. We're even haunted by the idea that people with disabilities are better off dead. There's been a great controversy in Canada that we've been part of lately around extending the right to euthanasia to disabled people who aren't in a terminal state of life, but who simply want to be relieved of the burden of disability. That's what the proponents of the idea that people would be better off dead believe. There's also the notion that people with disabilities are a burden, that they can't learn, and that they're fundamentally unacceptable. We're still, many people who support people with disabilities can still report, and many people with disabilities can still report people asking that they be excluded from a restaurant because they discussed one of the other patrons. So the idea that we haven't yet centered on the person, and that we need to be purposeful, we need to be intentional, we need to be thoughtful about avoiding being haunted and the lives of the people that we support being haunted by these ghosts is real for us. So this is our idea of what the person part means. I was thinking about you as a group, a faceless group at that point. Now I've got little tiny faces to look at on the screen, but I was thinking about you last week, a couple of weeks ago, when I was talking with a group of people and their families in Alberta, in Canada. And I asked them for their advice. They're all people who receive support or whose family members receive support. And so I asked them for their advice about what it meant to them to be held in the center of your work. And here's my summary of what they said. The first and most important thing for them was that you be trustworthy in honoring your agreements. That when you agree to provide support to people, that has implications for time management. It has implications for what you're going to learn to do. It has implications for how you're willing to stretch yourself. It has implications for your ethics and honesty. So be trustworthy in honoring whatever it is you've agreed to do, whatever support you've agreed to provide in a person's life. The second thing is to be mindful and thoughtful in offering assistance and to follow the person's lead. And following a person's lead is more difficult when the person has greater difficulty with self-regulation and has a real problem sending clear signals about what's going to help them because they're overwhelmed by whatever emotional dysregulation they're trying to deal with at the moment, or whatever physical dysregulation they're trying to deal with. It's also challenging when it's very difficult to understand a person's communication when there's a crisis, but you can always have the intention of following the person's lead as best you can describe it, as best you can understand it. When I think about this idea of being mindful in offering assistance, I think of these words from a woman called Anna, whom I met a few years after we started to use the person-centered terms. Anna's a woman who uses a letterboard to spell out her words. And this is what she spelled to me in a conversation about the support that she received. If I could, she says, I would give each staff person a gift. I would give them the gift of feeling what it is like for me to get up in the morning and get ready for the day. They know it from their side. They know what it's like to do the work of helping me to shower and get dressed. But I want them to feel the work that it takes from my side to get their help. It takes a lot of energy from me, and I can tell by the person's touch whether they care anything about my day or not. When you matter to the person helping you, this work of getting help is not so tiring. So being mindful and thoughtful in offering the assistance that you agreed to provide. And then learning and following what works. You're part of a support system. You're part of an organization that has a support arrangement with a person. So learn and follow what works for this person in this organization. When you've got an idea, sometimes new people come into someone's lives and do have an insight, do have a great idea. But many people with disabilities would appreciate not having the idea just unleashed on them. So learn what to do when you've got an idea for something that might work better for a person. There's probably already somebody who's responsible for coordinating all of somebody's support. And there are people who know the person better than you. So what should you do when you've got a good idea? Who should you consult? What about if you have a disagreement with the person or you're in a conflict with the person? Being human beings, we will have conflicts, we will have disagreements. What works to sort that out? And obviously, when you don't know how to do something, don't pretend that you know how to do something that you don't. And then check yourself, because at least after 54 years, I can tell you that the ghosts of the institution past still visit you. You still find yourself, I still find myself ignoring, missing the key elements of being a person. So check yourself for visits from the ghost, those moments when you think, I really do know better about this person's life, versus thinking, we can find better in this situation if we enter into dialogue with each other, if I listen deeper and better before I try to impose my will on somebody. So that's how to hold the person in the center from the point of view of a number of people. I hope maybe you get a chance to ask some people who are supported by Thistle what it means to them to be held in the center of the work that you do. So person-centered work, in our intention with naming it, was to make the invisible visible by naming and welcoming gifts. Our friend Judith Snow, who's shown there at the Royal Ontario Museum where her art was on display, brought this idea of naming and welcoming gifts as a key part of the work into very vivid highlight. Judith says that a gift is a personal quality, any personal quality that when it's brought into relationship in a valued way, allows an opportunity to emerge. That's kind of what the job is, trying to figure out with what support can a person's gifts be brought into relationship so that opportunities emerge. And this can be very small moments. I think this is a picture of one, these young women having the opportunity to be in conversation with Judith about her art, to notice a person with significant multiple disabilities as an artist, as a teacher, as a wise adult. That may only be a 10-minute opportunity, but it's a real one nonetheless. And imagine if Judith had a personal assistant who grabbed her and wheeled her away to engage some scheduled bathroom routine or to take a medication. Unimaginable almost, unfortunately not. So my suggestion, if you're interested, is to practice a live with for the next few days, to live with this idea of gifts. And a live with is just simply turning your awareness intentionally to gifts, to their reality, to their presence already in your life as something to learn a bit more about, to spend some time thinking about. That's all live with means. It's not what you do all day, every day now, but what you give a little bit of intentional time and attention to. So if you search John McKnight gifts and watch or read what you find for a few minutes, the first thing that comes up for me is a series of 4 3-minute videos that do a wonderful job of describing the idea of giftedness, what difference it makes, and how to name and claim gifts. Write something down, discuss your learning. Keep searching a little bit if you have the time, and find a bit more about gifts and giftedness from other perspectives. So you might do that sometime in the next few days. You might take just a few minutes to think of a couple of people who have brought meaning into your life. Could be a person with a disability, certainly doesn't have to be. Could be somebody from your childhood, could be somebody from now. Just think of a couple of people who have brought meaning into your life and name their gifts quietly and to yourself. In your mind, imagine how your friends might name your gifts. What do you think, if people were looking at you from that point of view, however improbable that may seem to you, what would they name as your gifts? And for yourself, name the gifts that you bring to the work of offering person-centered support and identify the conditions that bring those gifts out in you. So see what it might be like, if you choose, to live with the idea of gifts, the reality of gifts for the next few days, and then create an image. Some words, but an image that expresses something important about making another person's gifts visible. Create an image on paper, in sculpture, in music, however you like, but something that's not a sentence with commas and periods and such things. And here's a starter for your live with. This is my one of my very numerous, somewhere in the 20s, great nieces, Violet. She's 9 at the time that she wrote this, and she was given an assignment in school to write something with the title, "If I Were a Gift." If I were a gift, I would be the gift of presence, because then I could keep company to people who need it. Fascinating idea. A fascinating idea. So that's where person-centered came from. That's where I think it is. That's where I hope it's going. If we have a minute or so, I'm happy to have comments or questions or anything that people might want to bring up.
Thanks, John. Questions, thoughts, comments?
I'm often worried that I am able to keep people in my mind as persons.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Do you want to come down, Stephen, and yeah, just nearer to this?
I said I often worry that I'm not able to keep people in my mind as full persons. It's very easy to just use a heuristic, a rule of thumb, or some kind of and I don't know how to. Yeah, I don't know how to do. It's so easy. If I think about people in my mind, then they are just little. I don't know how to get that. It feels like it takes a lot of energy to think of people as whole persons, and I hope that will become easier. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a really important point, I think. One thought that I have is it's easier to do than it is to think about. Because when you're in the actual presence of a real person and their world, there's the support that comes from that person. As social beings, we're disposed to recruit other people into our lives. We're disposed to accommodate to other people. And so your intention to see and respond to a whole person brings support from that person and from other people who are the person's allies. And you're likely to be doing something, right, to assist the person with them. So there's lots more support to doing it than there is to thinking about it. And if you have a mindfulness habit of just noticing when that reduction of the person begins to happen, and just noticing it and not being freaked by it, but just noticing and letting it go, that makes it easier to do than to think about. But I sure agree with you that it's the heuristics, the shortcuts, almost all fall in the direction of devaluing the person and devaluing ourselves. Thanks for speaking up. Okay, that's me done then. Thank you very much for your attention this morning. I
Oh, John,
appreciate it.
Thank you very much. You've given us, as always, lots to think about, and just it's great to hear the history. I think we're in danger of losing that sometimes, and we forget where we started. So it's good to remember the places where it began and the ways it began, and that reminder about what it means to be person-centered is just invaluable to us. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
You get to leave now, John, I think. Thank you very much. And sorry about the technical glitches at the start.
Don't worry.
Yeah, okay.